Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. And basically today we will try to understand the use memo hook, right, which is provided by the React. So let's understand it with the help of code example, and then I will elaborate the concept behind the scene, right? Okay. So let's come to the editor that is VS Code. So I have already created a React project, basic React project with you can create it by you can create it using npm create React app, or you can use like npm create white at the rate latest. Please search on the internet. So okay, that's for all, and let's understand the problem. Our task is to create a component that perform an expensive calculation finding the factorial based on a user input. Use memo to ensure that calculation is only recomputed when the input changes, not on every render, right? So basically, first let's understand what is use memo hook. Use memo is a React hook that lets you cache the result of a calculated between re-render. Basically, it can cache the result between re-render. So, so let's try to solve the problem. So first, let's create a basic app. Oh, okay, app component. Okay, right. That's it is the app component. Basically, what the problem is says that based on the user input. So use memo to ensure that the calculation is only computed when the input changes. So what 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 we need to calculate, that we need input box. Input type is equal to number, value is, let's value, let's input value. Okay, let's define a state variable and then pass the value of that state variable, right? So const ip input set ip, right? Use state, let's initialize it with it 0, then pass it that input. So this is the input, this is the input, this is the input input box, and whenever input changes we have to calculate the factorial of changed input, and so in the p tag, right? So let's show the result in p tag. The factorial factorial is okay. Let's leave it as for now. Now this is the question, right? So what we can do, we can do it like basically I have to use memo hook. Okay, basically I have to, okay, that's fine. That is, yeah, yeah. Cost calcu factorial cost factorial of input. Let's define factorial value. Function factorial, and if n is 0, that is the basic DSA question. How to calculate factorial of n number, factorial of a number n, right? Yeah, or n is equal to 1, return 1, right? Sorry, there would be curly braces. Yeah, else return n into factorial n minus 1, or factorial of input. Basically it is the factorial of input input is equal to factorial factorial what I have to I have to find the factorial of input, right? So this is the IP, and in this I have to show factorial of input. Okay, fine. So that is the basic code which calculates the factorial, and till now I haven't implemented the use memo hook, right? So let's try to run the app and see what the output came, right? Okay, fine, fine. Yeah, that's good. Okay, npm run dev, npm run dev. So let's see what result we can get. Basically this the factorial is 1, and here is the input value. So I am not able to change the input value inside it, right? Why? We will see it soon. The factorial is 1. Basically 0th factorial is 1. So why? Basically by default input is 0. Basically initial value of input is 0, and when we try to get the factorial of this input value is equal to input, then it reference to there and it gets 0. So value is equal to value is 0, and we want to calculate the factorial is factorial of input. So what here we have calculated the result of factorial of input is equal to factorial input, right? So that okay, we get. So what we can do, basically it is the state variable. So we need to change the state variable, right? So how we can change state variable? So we can change it like on change set input number e dot target e dot target dot value. Okay, yeah. Now we will able to change the input value in input box, right? So let's see. Yeah, here you can see. Yeah, factorial is calculating. So basically it is not the final answer, right? So what we need to do, basically what the problem is asked, basically this is the calculation of the factorial, but we have to, as we know that the factorial is heavy calculation. So it would be good if we try to memorize it, and it only renders. Basically, what useMemo says, useMemo is a React hook that lets you cache the result of calculation between re-renders. So basically, we want to allow it to re-render only if input value changes, not on every render heavy calculation get calculated, right? So we need to memorize it. So how we can do it instead of this, we can do use memo hook to memorize the heavy calculation. So let's memorize the heavy calculation factorial of input. So what we need to do, const factorial of input is equal to use memo provided by React. Use memo, yeah, use memo from React callback function. return. What we need to do? Factorial of input. Yeah, and we need to pass a dependency array. What dependency array will do? It will only re-render when input value changes. Basically, when we increase or decrease input value, then it will re-render, right? Otherwise it will not render the it will not it will it will render, but it will not calculate the heavy calculation factorial. Basically it memoizes, and it will only re-render the calculation of the heavy calculation if only input value changes. Basically it only depend on input value, right? So that's good. Now let's see what we are achieving it or not. So factorial 0 is 1, factorial 1 1 2 2 3 6 4. Yeah, we are able to get the factorial, right? That's good. Yeah. So we have achieved it. But now I want to show that how we can get it is not re-rendering on on it is only re-rendering on changing the state of input value only, right? So let's try to define another state variable counter, and we would increase the counter one by one, right? So let's do count count set count set count use state. Let's initialize it with 0. Now we will define, it is not the problem question, but I am trying to give this to illustrate the how use memo work behind the scene, right? So let's create a button increment counter increment count. So let's pass the value of COULT. Yeah, that's good. So what we can do, on click, on click, on click. What we need to do, on click, we need to do increase the counter variable by one on every on click. So it is the function which provides the functionality to update the DOM, right? Yeah. So we will use set count plus one. That's good. Let's see. Here is the factorial calculation is only done when input input changes, and increment counter will increment the count variable, state variable, right? So now we have achieved it. Now let's try to observe this. Oh, sorry. Let's try to observe this. Yeah, sorry, I got forget to add console.log. So let's in the heavy calculation. What is the heavy calculation? Heavy calculation is the calculating the factorial. So let's console.log. It's it's a heavy calculation. Heavy calculation, right? So that's good. So let me write one thing more, and then I will comment it down. Yeah. So basically, what we have done, we have achieved what we really wanted. So let's try to understand that. First, let's don't memorize the heavy calculation. If we don't memorize the heavy calculation and we directly call, and we directly calculate calculate cost factorial of input. Basically this heavy calculation which we are trying to calculate are is not memoized. Then on every state change, whenever state changes of app component, any state, either input state or count state. This heavy calculation will recalculated. Basically, this is the heavy calculation. It will recalculated, and it will not depend on the what state changes. Either whatever state changes inside the app component, it will always recalculated. So let's see. Yeah, sorry, let's refresh. Okay, so first time when component mounted on the dome, it it's calculated, heavy calculation calculated. It is showing the result of it is heavy calculation. Now let's try to calculate the factorial. State input changes and its heavy calculation. State input changes its heavy calculation. State input changes its heavy calculation. You can see that how why it is increasing exponentially. It is because we are we are using recursive code, and whenever value changes and it become larger, then it goes to this function call, and this call, suppose their input value is 3, then factorial 3 calls this. Again it comes to here, factorial 2 calls factorial 2, and again this factorial 1 calls factorial 1, and then base case reaches. So that is why it is exponentially calculating, right? So now we are saying that on incrementing the input value, heavy calculation is done. Heavy calculation is calculating, right? So now let's refresh and let's see the magic. So actually, what use memo hook generally do, it memoizes the heavy calculation, and it will only calculated whenever input value changes. But here we are not using use memo for calculating the factorial of input. Then we can see that it it will heavy calculation will be done either any any state of the component changes, either input state or count state. So let's see, on incrementing count, heavy calculation is being done or not. Yeah, you can see that heavy calculation is being done. But what if we limit the calculation of heavy calculation, that is finding factorial using use memo hook? So what we can do, let's comment it down, and now uncomment this. And I have memoized the heavy calculation. Basically, use memo is a react hook that lets you cache the result of calculation between re-renders. And what and on now on it will only get calculated whenever input value changes. So let's see, on increasing, first refresh the page. Yeah, on increasing, heavy calculation is being done. But will you see now, on incrementing count, because it is the count state is changing, not the input state. So now this time, because we have memorized the heavy calculation, it will not, heavy calculation will be not done. Let's see, here you can see the count is increasing, but as earlier, heavy calculation is not triggered, right? So that is all about use memo hook. So now I hope you got it well. So thank you for today's class. So you can see the code, and trying, and please try to implement itself by yourself. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye bye.